last year at one of the ISACA conferences, I chatted with him
Okay.
a little bit.
So you need me to
Looks like you're recording already.
Yeah. The
Why
armor.
don't we?
Alright, so take a look, have fun. Maybe this is the career path you want to go in.
So, just going to cover a handful of tools tonight at a very high level. If you have questions, by all means, say something, stop me. We're going to run through a tool called Nmap. I don't know if you've heard of it or heard reference to it. It's basically just a tool to scan your network and find vulnerabilities on your network. And then based on what we can see from that Nmap tool, we're then going to use a tool called Metasploitable to, hopefully, if the demo gods bless me, allow me to break into a test server that I've got running in a separate VM and get in. And then we'll change complete topics and we'll go to a web application attack, a very simple one where I will spin up a sacrificial web server that's built deliberately vulnerable called WebGoat and just demonstrate a cross-site scripting attack. I will warn you, my notes are also on the laptop, and I don't have this stuff memorized, so there will be some flipping back and forth as I'm trying to look up what command I have to use, because I haven't done this in my work for about 5 or 6 years. But there's nothing wrong with using a cheat sheet. Even the good hackers are doing that. So with that, the setup here, you see on the top tabs, what I've got is, on this tab is Metasploitable. Metasploitable is a deliberately very vulnerable server. It's got lots of older versions of software running on it, and it's built just for people to do exactly this. Spin it up inside a VM. You would not want to put this thing out anywhere on the internet because it is extremely vulnerable. There are more vulnerabilities in it than they built into it because people are always finding new things beyond what they intended. So you don't want to be sitting on the network with this. And then on the other tab is Kali. Kali is a framework or a VM that has many attack tools built into it. We're only going to use a couple of them, but it comes pre-configured so you don't have to set things up. You can simply download it and run it in a VM and have available to you effectively the same tools that professional penetration testers use when it stays awake. Okay. All right. So the first thing in this Metasploitable, so if we're going to attack something, we need to know what we're going to attack. Anybody here comfortable with Linux at all? No hands? Okay. So first thing you have to figure out is what is the IP address of this device. So in Linux, it's really simple, assuming it works, ifconfig, and read off that line there that says 192.168.40.129. Now, I'm writing it down because basically every time I spin these things up, they might get slightly different addresses. So it's not something I have scripted or memorized. In Metasploitable, that's the last thing we have to do on this tab because it just sits there and runs and lays there vulnerable. If, there we go. If you're not familiar with VMware, the good news is as a student, it's actually, you get a 1-year license for free off of Software Hub. I would definitely recommend pulling it down and playing with it. In this instance, I've got 2 different machines running. I've had up to 4 or 5 machines running on the same laptop simultaneously. And if you have a big machine at home, like I have basically a server grade, 32 gigs, I can have an entire data system running on my desktop and play games. So here, the first thing we'll do is this tool called Nmap. So that one's real simple, just to show you what's there, and hopefully it all works, because it worked when I tested it before class. So 192.168.40.129. So numlock keeps turning off. So I spelled Nmap correctly. I got the right number in. If it works right, should be a couple of seconds. And here we go. This is a list. Really ran quick, 0.28 seconds. It's a list of all of the things that are running on that other virtual machine, just at a high level. But it's not necessarily telling you what versions or more juicy detail. So you can use that same Nmap tool. And again, you have to spell it correctly, and I always do that. Now here, if you want to know what this stuff does, you can actually look up all these commands. I just happen to know that these work. All I'm really telling it is dig a little deeper, and it'll take a little bit longer. Hopefully it'll run here. Like I said, it worked out in the hallway. No. Okay. Did I spell it correctly? Yeah. Let's see. What does this look like? Well, let's try it again. Nmap SSS A 192, 168, 40, 129. If not, then I'll go restart that Metasploital, and we'll see if we'll try a second time. This has never gone smoothly one time I've done it, so there's always something that goes wrong. While we're waiting for this to run, any questions? No? Okay. We'll give it a few more seconds, and then I'll abort, and we'll go restart that other machine. All right, it should have launched right now. So we'll back it up and start over. That's the other nice thing about these. You can simply restart them. While we're waiting, the Metasploitable tool, we're just going to show one quick attack in it, but it is loaded with different ways to attack things, and it's not just against Linux. It actually has more for the Windows environment to attack. It also can go after infrastructure, routers, switches, that kind of thing. And it even has a separate module for launching social engineering attacks. So the phishing emails that you hear about, this tool will actually create the malware, attach it to an email, and send it to your email service to distribute to whoever you want to attack. All right, let's get logged in and try this again. These are real simple. They actually tell you what the password is on the login screen. Okay, make sure that the address didn't change. That it's the same. And hopefully it's not the other application that failed. All right. Let's try the base one first. Okay, so the address is up. 92, 168, 40, 129. All right. Stop. All right. Here we go. This one. Just further than we got last year, because last year we couldn't even get the screen to display, which made it a really bad demo. If this doesn't work, I'll skip right to the actually attacking, because I know, oh, okay, it did work. So here, this is actually pages and pages of information about what it found. So start at the top here. So it found SSH keys. It found an older version of SMTP, OS privileges, DNS attacks. There's an Apache server that could be attacked if you wanted to go after it. RPC, so remote attacks. So it's giving you all kinds of stuff here. The one that we're going to go after is the Samba, because I know it'll work. It works very reliably to break in. So that's all that we'll use Nmap for. But you could, before we leave this, Nmap, I just pointed at N address. You could actually, if you got onto a network, tell it to scan the entire address range of all the systems on the network, collect all of this information, and then comb through it and figure out what system you wanted to attack. Now the good news is it's pretty noisy. So if you're a defender, you're running some kind of a security operations group in a company, someone lights off this tool, if you have any kind of security sensors on your network, you should know it. It will make lots of noise. There are stealthy ways to do this that don't collect as much information. You can do it kind of manually, just using ping sweeps and map out the network. That won't trigger a security group, but this tool definitely will. Okay, so with that, we're going to come down here to Metasploit Framework. See if it actually launches for me. One thing you will find if you get into doing pen testing is you will be backing up and starting over again regularly, because this stuff does not always work. Okay, so now this is the Metasploit Framework console. Now if you want to pay money, they have a nice, pretty graphic front end and lots of help. But this one is free to download and use. First time you run it, it tells you you have to click a little thing that says, yes, I promise to be good and not use it for evil. Bad guys don't have any problem saying yes to that anyway. Now, I want to cheat for a second. Go back up to my, we got here, yeah. So exploit multi-Samba user map. Let's see if I can remember that. Nice thing with Linux, if you are typing the correct things, you get a few letters in and hit the tab, it will fill the rest out. It will also tell you then if you're typing it wrong. And I've already forgotten what the last thing was. So, user map scripts. Okay, so here I'm telling it what kind of exploit to use. I know this because if I'd have done my homework when I found that Samba vulnerability listed, then I would have done research and figured out this is an exploit that will work against that vulnerability. So now I've loaded that one in. I need to tell it a few things, like what's the IP address I want it to attack. So set that, and I always, let's see, what else do I need to tell it? Oh yeah, payload. So command Unix reverse netcat. Nope, got ahead of myself. Command, oh, lowercase, so CMD with the other slash. This is why I usually work with notes. And I misspelled CMD, so I'm just a mess today. There we go. Now before I hit enter, a word about netcat. So netcat is a little program that is almost always installed on a Linux machine unless somebody actually really knows what they're doing and removed it after they ran the install scripts. And what netcat does is exactly what we're going to use it for. It allows you to set up direct network communications from one machine to another and tunnel files and commands. If in Windows space, there is a Windows version. If you download it and you have antivirus running, an antivirus program will automatically mark it as malware and strip it out. So if you want to play with it on Windows, you have to turn off or whitelist netcat to play with it. It is used legitimately by sysadmins to pass information back and forth rather than getting a CD or a USB or whatever, they can just use the network to pass the information. If I got this right, it should accept it. Yep. And let's see what else I got to set. And who am I? So with that, let me go to, got to run that same command for ifconfig on this system, see what address it gives me, and 128 is the bottom one there, so set localhost, and I need to spell it correctly. Now, if I got all that right, I can do show options, and it'll just, nope, I got something wrong. No. All right, what am I doing wrong? No, I typed it right the first time. Not sure why it's not working. There, okay. So I can do that and just check to make sure. So I got 129. It already populated the port. Have you covered the idea of ports, or they know that? Or okay. So logically, when a computer is talking to another computer, in order to keep the conversations straight, it's all going on the same network cable, but the machines assign a port number so that when it's received on the other end, the system can keep track of which application internally that communication was meant for. So there are lots of common ports you'll hear, like if you're on the internet, you're using a browser, it's almost always either port 80 or port 443. But that's really just a number that's attached to the packet so that the receiving machine knows where to send it when it receives it. In this instance, for this attack, a standard remote port is always 139 because that's a port associated with Samba. So if I got all this right, I can just type exploit and let it rip. And it actually should already be in. Now I'm going to cheat because I can never remember all of it, but what I'm doing here is adding a little additional code, and I keep it written down on the other slide. This is the kind of thing I'd have in a text file someplace. So import pty semicolon. That one. And what this is actually doing is it's going to tell the machine on the other end to spin up a bash shell so that spin up some software so that when it responds, it gives me a little more information about it so you can see that I'm actually in on the other machine. If I typed that right. No, I didn't. Import pty, yeah. Bin bash. It won't like that. That's the other thing when you get in. We'll see if this will even take it. You're not actually in on a terminal, so you only really get one shot to type it right. You can't use the back key like I just tried to do. It won't work. Semicolon. One of these days I really do got to memorize this. All right. parentheses, double dash. So. Make sure I got that right. Dash, and then double close, close. Okay, didn't like something. No. Well, here, at this point, what I'll just do is, it kicked me out. Too much noise. So I can go exploit it again, start over again. We'll do it the simple way. And this is just showing you that I'm logged in as root on the other machine. It's not as obvious here because I'm also logged in as root on this machine, but it is actually connecting to the Metasploitable version to do this. Had I gotten the command typed in properly, it would actually came back as root at Metasploitable.com. So that is Nmap and Metasploitable. So we'll get out of this hell and go to a different hell. Any questions on anything so far? Now we're going to go to something completely different. So the first thing I'm launching is Burp Suite. Now, we're not actually going to use Burp Suite. I just need it to connect things together. But Burp Suite is something called an intercepting proxy. So normally, if you spin up a web browser and talk to a website, the communication basically just goes from your browser to the website. Whatever leaves the browser gets to the website. Whatever leaves the website gets to your browser. The intercepting proxy allows you to get in the way of that communication and, if you want, even change the communication. So if you've ever been on a website, let's say you have to enter your address, and you get down to your zip code, and you try to type anything other than a number, and it won't let you type, say, A, B, C, D, E, F, however many it is. It makes you type numbers. The intercepting proxy lets you intercept the communication after it's left the browser, bypass the controls that were put into the browser, and substitute whatever you want to substitute. A tap code, just something weird, just see what the server will do on the other end. In this instance, we're just using it to make the connection because I have the browser automatically set up to use it. And we're going to turn intercept off so it stays out of the way. So that's that. Now, that's the other thing I need to do. We need to start WebGoat. So, let's see if it's, should still be in here. The other really nice, there we go. So this is Java's pre-installed on this machine, part of the system, using Java to run and create a virtual web server inside the virtual machine so we have something to connect to. And it'll take 30 seconds to a minute to run through this. Oh, unless it did it much faster. Well, let's see if we get there. And we're going to use Iceweasel, which is, it's just a browser. It's a Firefox-based version of the browser that was built for security people to do testing. There we go. There's the rest of it coming. Now, if it all worked, and I got, so here, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of localhost. So if you just want to talk to yourself, there's built in either the address of 127.0.0.1 or the word localhost. And what it tells the browser is, don't go out to the internet for this conversation. Just look on this machine, and now look on port 8080 on this machine. That happens to be WebGoat is pre-configured to listen on that port. And if it worked right, didn't take. Here, it actually worked. So now we're in a web browser looking at a deliberately vulnerable web server that's running on this machine. So we're not leaving this machine. And in this case, I've already got the user ID and password typed in, and it's really complex, guest. And if you scroll down, you'll actually see it tells you that as well. This is also free. You can download it and play with it. The nice thing is we're only going to cover one thing here, but it actually covers access control flaws, authentication flaws, buffer overflows. You can pretty much get an entire education on web application security just working through the attacks in here. And if you're a developer, it will also run you through an education on how to fix websites so they're not susceptible to these flaws. Now in this instance, we're going to stick to a very simple one called cross-site scripting. So cross-site scripting is the fact that browsers know how to interpret text as code. In this case, we're going to take advantage of JavaScript and the fact that the browser, if it sees JavaScript, will execute it, even if it was typed into, say, the input box where you were expecting to put a password. So in this particular instance, I'm going to cheat because I'm lazy and I want to get it right. And I'm just going to come down here and grab this code. If I copied it correctly. So this code I've got highlighted here is JavaScript. And what it's going to do is it's going to trick the browser into creating what looks like a login screen on a website that doesn't have a login screen. And might trick a user into entering their credentials. So if you buried this text on a website, user goes to it, this would pop, say, oh, I got to log in. They enter their credentials, and what you're really doing behind the scenes is harvesting their credentials. So it's one of the techniques that bad guys use to collect that. So now we come up here, and you'll see that below this search box here, all you have is cookies, parameters, some other information they're showing you. But I'm going to take that code that I had, and I'm going to paste it in here, and I'm going to hit search. So I'm searching for, in this case, they would have had you search for a tool or whatever they were trying to sell, and it runs. Now, if I scroll down and keep scrolling, you get this. Feature requires account login. Give me your password, user ID. This did not come from the server other than it's hosting the page. This is the JavaScript that I pasted into that search box. So this is the technique you can use to harvest all kinds of information. There are lots of more, or a lot of additional things you can do with this cross-site scripting attack. You can actually inject malicious logs into a log system if you know what system a company is using. So one of the techniques that a bad guy might use, or bad girl, whoever, they could put this cross-site scripting into a website and have it write to the logging system for the website so that when an admin is reviewing the logs, the script runs and captures the admin's user credentials and sends it back out to the attacker. So now I have admin credentials to get into your system. I'm not going to do the exercise, but there's another one called cross-site request forgery. And that one, like these days, almost all the browsers have multiple tabs. And the browsers are supposed to be built so that what happens in one tab stays in one tab. But if you don't have it configured just right, you can have code in one tab, jump tabs, and grab data off of another tab. Doesn't sound that interesting unless you think about, let's say you have a financial institution and you have a fan website of that financial institution. It's not out of the question to have someone logged into both sites at the same time. I put my malicious code up on the fan site, which probably has much lower security, and use that to jump tabs and say, add a bank, do a transaction, and take the money out of the financial institution. There are controls you can put in, but they all rely on that cross-site scripting attack not working. If you don't lock down cross-site scripting, then I can steal the code that unlocks that cross-site request forgery. That's what I have. Please, questions, anybody on anything? What do you want to know about security? Question you always wondered. It doesn't have to be about anything I covered here. No? Okay. Thank you very much for your time. And I'm going to tear this stuff down.
I hope you guys are paying attention. This will be on the test.
It'll take me a couple seconds to get this shut down.
So, who thinks hacking is sexy? And that's something you might want to do. Cool. Okay, so that's hold on, let me see here. Okay, so this is the review for the exam. I'm going to shut it down. And the exam is going to be on the week of December 5th. Okay? Question?
It's going to be on class capture.
It's on Capture now.
Okay.
Yeah, so the review's on Capture now.
Thanks. Hold on. Can you write it, please?
Yeah?
You said.
Okay, so there's a 40-question exam. Okay? That means that's 2.5 points per question. And it's similar to the last format where you got some pick the correct choice, you got some true and false, you got some fill in the blanks, you got some filling in of the orders in which things happen, true and false, I said, and then open-ended questions with free-form answers. Okay? I'm going to give you the question, and then you guys tell me the answer, about the right answer. And if not, then we'll discuss what the concept is. The idea is that you have learned all these concepts over the past couple weeks, including today's treat of hacking demo. Okay, so the top threads for 2016 includes what? What do you guys get in your email that tells you to do things that you shouldn't be doing? Phishing attack, right? Perfect.
What is it?
Phishing attack.
Fishing. Like PH, right?
Go fishing. Well, you should figure that out by now, right? In today's class. Okay. What the critical elements of an IT security program should include. So it includes what? We talked about management's commitment to the program, right? Because if it doesn't have management's commitment, it's just lip service. Okay? Next question asks for what is true about data security breach? We had a class on legal and regulation requirements, right? So security breach will trigger some regulatory and legal actions as necessary. Okay. What is the purpose of an IT security gap or risk assessment? You guys know what that is. It's to determine the value of the data generated and stored. It's to identify and modify the company's also to comply with law and regs. Right? Those are all part of security risk assessment. I'm going to give you a couple words like information security, cybersecurity, data breach, information governance, information risk control, data privacy, information security incidents, and data classification. Know what those definitions are, okay? Because I'm going to give you the definition and then you just figure out which term those definition means.
Can you repeat that?
All right, so cybersecurity, information risk, information governance, data breach, information security, information risk control, data privacy, information security incidents, and data classification. Understand what each one of those means. Know the NIST security framework, right? On how organizations should be prepared to effectively manage cyber risk. Remember the 5 components of the NIST framework? You identify, which is to understand the requirements for managing cybersecurity. After you identify what all the assets and information that you have are, you protect it, right? So you develop and implement the appropriate safeguard to ensure protection of the enterprise asset. Once you protect it, or you put protection mechanism in place, you got to detect and recognize occurrences of cybersecurity events against these assets, right? And if you detect something, then you respond to those detection, right? And then after you respond to it, which is an incident had already occurred, you recover. Okay? So those are the 5 NIST security framework. Identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Then I got a question on what is a honeypot and what's the purpose for its use. So what is a honeypot? Who's going to tell me?
That would be like pretend to try and get hacked or catch hacked. So sort of set up a trap for it.
Right, so it's a computer network that is set up as a trap that is separated from the real network, right, with false data to lure in the attacker, to study the hacker's breach method or attack methods, right? And the purpose is to understand the method so you can secure your network better, right? That's a honeypot. And its purpose. And then if I want to, or an institution want to minimize fraud, what should they put in place? What should organizations put in place to prevent fraud? Sorry.
Auditing.
Audit. What else? What other controls? Remember we talked about SOD, segregation of duties control, right? We talked about forced vacation, the reason why you would force somebody to take a vacation, or especially those that are in critical role. Why? Because what would do?
See how the organization functions when they're gone. So
Yes.
it's a week vacation.
Right. So if you force them to take a vacation, they're not there day in, day out to then change those transactions to the way they have manipulated it, right? It gives time for the transactions to process through and somebody else picking up that transaction, seeing if it's an unusual event or not, right? That's one of the preventative measures for fraud. The other preventative measure for fraud is what? Rotation of the duties, right? You rotate people around. They're not too comfortable with any one position to commit fraud. And then you also, the other piece we always talk about is training, right? Against social engineering, because a lot of time fraud are committed simply through the act of social engineering to get some information credentials. Understand what the term threat means? What is a threat? What should management consider the most when classifying data? And we talked about the concept of availability, integrity, and confidentiality, right? So what's availability? Data is what? Available when you want it, when you need it, when you ask for it, right? Integrity means what? It's correct. It retains its value in transit and at rest, right? It doesn't get altered. And then confidentiality is that it remains in its state of privacy, right? That it doesn't get distributed to people who doesn't need to have the data. That's confidential to those that it has meaning to. Okay. We're talking about who has the primary responsibility to determine classification of information. So who has the primary responsibility to classify data? What do you guys think? We talked about this next time. Who owns the data? So when you create a transaction on Amazon, who owns that data? The system owner, right? It's not the user, right? IT department don't own the data, right? Senior management don't own the data, right? It's the system owner that owns the data. So for example, HR data. Who owns HR data? Who's the owner of the HR system? Is it IT? It would be HR, right? So HR is the owner of the HR system, and all the data related to HR has to be protected by the HR department, right? Not senior management, not executive, not IT, okay? Not the functional manager, not like the marketing people or accounting people, right? So.
What would they, you didn't answer, you're looking for the question. The last time it was, can you say company management, what would be responsible?
But no. But now we're getting down to the next level. It's not just company management. Who within the company really owns it? It's actually the system owners that owns the transaction that happens on a daily basis. Okay, so they own it. They have to classify that data on how to adequately protect it. Right. The primary objective of implementing corporate governance by an organization's management is to what? What is the objective of implementing the governance? Governance is what? It's process, right? So it provides strategic directions for employees to operate, right? Governance is policy, procedures, standards, training, right? Culture. Those are the governance stuff. And all those things provide directions, strategic directions for employees to properly behave. Okay? So with all that, what is the best approach to mitigating the risk of a phishing attack, for example? How do you prevent a phishing attack? Or try to prevent a phishing attack? Education, right. User education is at this point the best method for prevention of phishing attack, because what it is an email in your mailbox. And if you click on it, you're done, right? So the only thing we can do at this point, after the system having filtered you out, is for you to learn not to click on it. Identify the key benefits of a controlled self-assessment. What's a controlled self-assessment? It's management's ownership of internal controls supporting the business objectives. Okay? Management do their own controlled self-assessment in order to support the objectives that they have. What's the objective of a service level management? You know how you have relationship with vendors, and with that relationship, you have to have service level agreements with the vendors, right? In order to make sure that the vendors are delivering in a way that you expect them to deliver, right? So the primary objective of service level management is what? To define agreed upon records and management that requires level of service, certain level of service that you come to expect from the vendor. So what's the most effective control for enforcing accountability among database users using sensitive information? So we have a bunch of people that have access to sensitive information or have elevated level of access, privileged access. What is the best way to control these users, these type of users? Talked about monitoring, right? Via log management, you look at the log. You don't turn off the log, but you have to log everything they do. And then you monitor those actions that they take on the system, because they are privileged users, right? And they can pretty much do anything and everything on the system, including delete, create, delete, modify, right? So you have to log their activity and monitor it. Information classification is most related to what? Is it the information's age? Information's destination? Source of information? Location it's stored? Or its value? Value, exactly. Right? Information classification is most related to the value of that data. So when you protect an organization's system, what is normally the next line of defense after the network firewall has been compromised? So your firewall has been compromised. What do you do to defend yourself next? We talk about IDS and IPS, right? Monitor your IDS system, right? Implement an IDS system so that you can monitor for unusual what those unusual activity or identify them, then hopefully you have an IPS system, which is information intrusion preventative system, right? But if you don't, the next thing after you've been compromised is to monitor the activity. All right, so let's say you've been breached. Yeah? A computer forensic investigator sees the computer. What do you do with it? What's the next step? After the compromised asset has been seized, do you remove all the parts and investigate it? Do you lock it up in a safe? Do you dust off for fingerprints evidence? Do you make an image of the disk or the PC? Do you label it and put it in a container and then make sure you label the container? What do you do? Exactly. You make an image of the compromised device and you investigate off of the image. So this way you do not tamper with the original device, okay? Because any action you do can potentially hamper the evidence and it will not be held up in the court of law. What's the difference between least privilege and need to know? You guys know? What is least privilege? Least privilege.
Someone who doesn't even know a lot of information about something, like within the company, his job doesn't require them to know a lot of information.
Yeah, so least privilege should be implemented to ensure that the person only access to the resources that they need to know. Okay. So it should be that the user should have a need to know access to a particular resource, and that least privilege should be implemented to ensure that only access those resources that they need to know. That's it. An assessment whose goal is to assess susceptibility of an organizational social engineering attack is best classified as. So a social engineering attack is what can be tested via what? Physical testing, vulnerability testing, just what you just witnessed, network testing, user acceptance testing, or personnel testing. Which one of these tests will assess social engineering type of attack? Social engineering uses what? Exploits what? People, right? So personnel assessment will assess social engineering type of attack. Right? There are two types of encryption that we talked about. We'll kind of briefly go over. Right? What are they? Two types of encryptions. Public key and private key encryption, right? I don't know what advanced persistent attack is. ATP. vulnerability is. Right? So know what a threat and a vulnerability is. Define vulnerability. And then in the last class, I showed you a couple of videos on how your cards can be exploited, your ATM card or your sales transaction can be exploited. So what should you do to avoid shoulder surfing while using your point of sales card or an ATM? Remember what the video tells you to do? Cover your PIN when you use these type of transactions, right? Alrighty. Primary focus in determining the appropriate level of protection for asset information is a result of risk assessment, right? Security technology program can include what? Background check, vulnerability assessment, right? Risk assessment. Is it true or false? True, right? We talked about some of the critical infrastructures that we have to protect. So, what are some of the critical infrastructure that we have to protect? Your power grid. What else? What do you need to protect? What are critical infrastructure? What are deemed critical infrastructure? So you got a broken leg. What'd you do? Where'd you go? Okay, so where did you go to get surgery? The hospital, right? So your health system is considered a critical infrastructure. What else is critical infrastructure? Do you not eat and drink every day? So if somebody poisons your water, would you not be affected? So your water systems and your food supply is critical infrastructure, right? Is money important to you? Does money buy some of the basic things you need plus more? So isn't financial systems a critical infrastructure in this country? Yeah? So if our communication network is down, if our satellites are down, y'all can't text and talk to each other and ping each other. Is that important to you? It would be, right? So our communication system is a critical infrastructure in this country. Yeah? And if somebody is really, really mean and evil, he's going to do a chemical bomb. So that will affect a lot of people in a very short period of time, right? So isn't your chemical industry a critical infrastructure? So we talked about some of these things that's critical infrastructure. So understand what some of them are, okay? The best practice for security, cybersecurity includes what? Strategic planning, right? Monitoring and improvements. And then keep following up and repeat some of the best practice stuff, right? So those are some of the best practice for cybersecurity. All of you uses mobile device, yeah? Your cell phone, your laptop, those are considered a mobile device. How do you secure them? How can a company secure the mobile device? Basic stuff, basic hygiene. What are some of them? What do you use to get into your laptop? Password, yeah, that's basic, right? university's network, what should you do?
Check secure network.
VPN in or secure
Oh,
network in,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
For remote access, right? On your phone, there's this feature that you use to connect to non-connected wired device, Bluetooth, right? Those devices can also be used to scan your devices for open ports or vulnerabilities, right? So shut off the Bluetooth connection when not in use, right? That's another basic steps for securing mobile device. What else? What another basic things? When you walk away, should your phone and laptop be turned on? So what's that feature that you should always have on?
Lock it.
Lock it, time out, right? And then we talked about this for the network device, but it works the same way for the mobile device. Hardening and software, hardware and software hardening, right? Which is one of the basic things is changing the default information, default user ID and password that comes with the device from the manufacturers, yeah? You talk about DCP and DR, right? Disaster recovery and business continuity plan. And both of those things are considered business continuity management, right? To ensure that the business gets back up and running in an event of a disaster. Okay? That's business continuity management. That's about it. I think I covered everything here. Any questions, comments? Any areas we did not discuss? Okay, so that'll be on the exam all this next week. 40 questions exam. You'll have the entire period, and then you'll be done